Hi guys, this is part 3 of our video series on Stepan. If you've not seen parts 1 and 2, go back on this video channel and take a look at those, and then we'll continue on with this third financial part. So we're going to dig into the numbers, recent performance, and we'll end up by taking a look at the stock. So as you can see, revenues developed particularly in the last few years. They had a good COVID year like many commodity chemical suppliers did, and roared out of COVID into 21 and 22. The last couple of years there's been a significant sales drop off, and you're going to see that trend repeated in a number of the other metrics that we go through. Similar story with operating income. They had a pretty good growth through 2022. These are in thousands of dollars, so that's over $250 million of operating income in 22. And in 23 and 24, where my head is, you can see significant decrease in operating income in both of those years from the peak of 2022. So let's take a look, and I mentioned this in prior videos, at the sales mix by business area. So surfactants really is the revenue workhorse of the company, as traditionally and typically still is around 70% of the total revenues of the company, a chunk of other revenue in polymers, and a little sliver pretty much every year in specialty chemicals. And you've seen again that drop off in sales, particularly in the surfactant segment since 2022. If you look at the operating income business mix, you get a bit of a different picture. I mean, the rankings are the same, but you can see the much more significant contribution of the polymers business to the overall operating income of the company. That's the polymers business there in the orange. And then again, that little chunk, sometimes fairly significant, I guess, particularly in 2022, of operating income from the specialties business. So EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, fairly strong build from 2011 to 2022. That was the peak EBITDA year for the life of the company, almost $300 million. And then again, tracking the sales, a significant drop off into 23 and 24. These are unadjusted numbers. If you go into the investor presentations from Stepan in the annual report also, you'll see they feature some adjusted numbers which account for things most significantly like business restructuring expenses. But the overall pattern again is still the same. And looking at the EBITDA percentage, you know, it's around, let's say, a 10% EBITDA return on sales type of business. A great year for many reasons in the COVID year of 2020, almost hitting 14% EBITDA return on sales. And then again, along with sales, a significant drop off to between, let's say, 6.5% to 8.5%. EBITDA return on sales in 23 and 24. Looking at the sales by region, you get a sense that North America is, as one might expect, the workhorse sales generator in terms of regions. But you know, Europe and Latin America in particular, Latin America fairly strong, especially in recent years, and a little bit of business in Asia. And again, this is now just surfactant sales. I should point out we're just looking at surfactant sales now, and how those are generated regionally. And going to gross profit, again, just in the surfactant business segment, you can see the importance of North America and the significant drop-off in North America since 2022 and the importance of that orange slug there, particularly in recent years, particularly I would say since 2020, the orange slug being Latin America. And of course, then you've got Europe, light blue, and Asia Pacific in dark blue. And finally, in terms of the financial numbers, again, just sticking with surfactants, this chart looks at the gross profit percentage for the surfactant business in each of the regions. I took out Asia Pacific because it's a pretty small data set, pretty small revenue there. But if you look at North America, Latin America, and Europe, you see something interesting in the black bar. That's North America gross profit percentage. You see that that's typically been the highest GP percent across the data set, higher than in Europe in particular, and also Latin America, except for this most recent year of 2024, where they're all pretty close, but North America GP percent is a little bit below what they earned in Europe and Latin America. So I want to end off this, and this has been a bit of a data dump, but I want to end off this with a couple of slides on SCL, the stock. So what we have here is taken from the Wall Street Journal, goes back to 1994, and it's a bit hard to find the data actually, but my understanding and recollection is that prior to 94, Stepan was quoted on the NASDAQ under the symbol STEP, and they switched to the New York Stock Exchange with the current symbol SCL in 1994. So if that's not correct, someone at Stepan, please let me know what the real deal is. But I understand this to be the life of the current New York Stock Exchange company. So we got 30 years worth of data, and what I've done here is just looked at stock price and compared that to the S&P 500 index. So Stepan is in black, right? And the black line. The S&P is in blue, and I put in on there for comparison purposes Croda in gold. And what you can see is, they all kind of track each other through into the mid 2000s. And then Stepan is handily beating the S&P 500 index for most of the remaining period until the stock started to follow basically the EBITDA down. And of course, then much more recently, there's been drop off in everything, right, including the S&P 500. But for most of that period, there was they were outpacing the S&P. And of course, you can see Croda, their stock, as we've covered in prior videos, has dropped off pretty significantly, has in fact had a harder fall than Stepan from its peak around 2022 and continuing through the present day. So that is the stock price. But what I wanted to take a look at was also the total return on the stock, because Stepan is notably, and they talk a lot about this in their presentations, a good dividend payer, and they've increased their dividend pretty steadily for the 30-year period since they've been on the New York Stock Exchange. So what this purports to do, and I hope it's right, it's an online tool. It looks at the value of $10,000 invested in the Stepan stock, SCL, in March of 1994, at the beginning of its life on the New York Stock Exchange. Not the life of the company, that goes back much, much further. But, the 30 years on the New York Stock Exchange, if you'd put $10,000 into Stepan in March of 94, which, by the way, I didn't, because for various reasons, one of which was I was working for a competitor at the time. And I haven't since, by the way, I haven't invested in Stepan. I don't invest in individual stocks. But anyway, that 10,000 would have got you 126,000 $267 up until the present day, with that equating to an annual return, you can see there, of 8.4% annual return, which is not bad, actually. And if you had had the wisdom and foresight to sell your stock at the peak, I don't know how you would have that wisdom or foresight, but if you did, I think the annual return would have been something like 13% a year. But anyway, an evolving story, not a bad financial return. Obviously, tough times today for Stepan and a lot of chemical companies, and obviously a lot of uncertainty going forward for many companies, including chemical companies, which has got me thinking maybe we need a follow-up when the dust settles, if the dust settles. Well, this particular dust will settle. There may be other dust that comes up. But I thank you for watching, and I thank you for listening to these opinions. As you can tell, I am certainly not a stock analyst expert. I did get some great feedback on the first two videos, and a number of folks kind of came forward and complimented their experience as customers with Stepan, and I certainly think that is worth highlighting. A very broad range global supplier of all types of surfactants, including biosurfactants, which I know we've talked about them investing in. So a lot to talk about with Stepan, a great benchmark. Kudos to their investor relations folks and the material that they have on the website and the data they put out there. I, as a student of surfactants, find that incredibly useful. And you should too if you are in the business of surfactants. So again, thanks for listening, and we'll talk again in the near future.